Hey, warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we have a little bit of news from the coaching front. We've actually got two pieces as Tom Moore, one of UConn's longtime assistants, he's retiring. That's not something that I think is going to be overly huge, but it is still something. And Eric Reveno, a guy that I really like, he is now going to be the head coach over at Brown. So we'll lead off with that. Another piece of news that we saw in college basketball on Thursday was the fact that Keyshawn Hall was really good over at Auburn last year. 19 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists. He's trying to be able to get another year of eligibility as well. We'll be talking about that with our good friend Blake Lovell. He does such great work over at Southeastern 16, so we'll be airing that out. We're going to be talking about all these court cases that we've been seeing in general. Could we see a second wave with regards to the transfer portal as well, with all the hoopla that is going on? And we've been seeing a lot of players that have been reclassifying, mainly out there in the SEC. So we're going to be chatting about that and so much more. So we'll get you guys a little bit more covered with regards to the Hall news in segment number 2. Segment number 1, we'll keep it to the coaches. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And per usual, I do beg with you, I do plead with you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions because that lets me know what you want to hear on this podcast here in the off season, and it helps me out in terms of being able to know exactly how to be able to navigate things and make this the greatest college basketball season ever. That's exactly what I'm looking to do. That's why this podcast has been going for over 2,400 straight days without a missed podcast, and conference previews are continuing as well. You got the Metro Conference yesterday. I'll look to do the MEAC here probably in the next 7 or so days. Then we're on to the Missouri Valley and the Mountain West conferences. So we've got a whole big giant bundle of fun there. But let's take a look at the coaching news that we saw in college basketball. This came out like an hour or two before I recorded. Longtime assistant Tom Moore, he announces that he is going to be stepping away from UConn, and this is going to affect UConn a little bit. Dan Hurley has a great system. I think that they're going to be just fine. With Moore, he wasn't really doing a lot with regards to coaching as well. He was more of the general manager these last few years with UConn as well. He was with the program, and he did a nice job in terms of being able to just help out Dan Hurley when he was starting out because he was filling in for Jim Calhoun, and I think that he was there during the Kevin Ollie days as well. So he's been able to really help out this team. He's done a nice job being able to pluck out talent, what have you. Shouldn't really impact this team for this year, but he was a good long-standing assistant. He was doing a good job as the general manager and helping out with just a little bit of this and that for the program for a very, very long time. So that does impact UConn a little bit. I still think that they're going to be fine for this upcoming season. The bigger piece of news, Eric Reveno. He is getting a second chance as a head coach, and well-deserved. Before I came out here to lovely Las Vegas, was in Portland, Oregon. He used to be the head coach for the Portland Pilots. I remember they canned him for Terry Porter, who we all remember from his days with the Portland Trailblazers. That turned out to be a disaster. Portland has not really been good over the last few years. Shout out to them being able to pull off a nice upset against Gonzaga last year, but you take a look at the way that Portland has toilet bowled ever since they lost Eric Reveno. It's been insane. Eric Reveno had 3 straight years of 19-plus wins for the Portland Pilots. They have reached more than 15 wins just twice ever since he left. Actually, just once, because in the 10 years since he has left, they have been 15-19 and worse in all but one of the years. The first year under Shante Leggins, where he brought all of his guys over with him, over from Eastern Washington, they went 19-15, and they have toilet bowled ever since. For Eric Reveno, he was actually doing a relatively solid job with his team, and ever since they let him go over at Portland, he has been an assistant for a lot of different places. He was over there for Georgia Tech for quite a few years. They were able to make a few NCAA tournaments with him back when he was the assistant under another fiery guy in Josh Pastner. And as we know, Georgia Tech, really, really good academic standards over there. Spent a little bit of time over at Oregon State, and he was coaching for Stanford. And with Stanford, obviously that's a school with some of the highest academic standards in all of college basketball. And the man that's currently coaching over at Stanford, and Kyle Smith, he started out as a coach over at Columbia. So he knows all about the league. He knows all about schools with high academic standards. And the reason why Brown was on the hunt for a coach is that Mike Martin, who was the longtime coach for them, he decided that he was going to be becoming an assistant coach over at Michigan, so they had a vacancy to fill. This, in my opinion, is really the best hire that they could have hoped for. Eric Reveno was able to do some really good work over at Portland. What sort of a system is he going to run? That's a little bit TBD, because the last time that he was a coach, he was coaching for the Portland Pirates during the 2015-16 season, but it's not like he was out of the game, coaching up the professional game or anything like that. He was just more or less an assistant coach when he was over at Portland. It was a team that typically was pretty solid with their three-point shooting, really gave it up from three-point range. Like, you look at that last year, then he was there, and they were allowing teams to shoot over 38% from three, albeit that's out there in the WCC, where a decade ago there was a lot of really good three-point shooting. But I mean, his teams have always been relatively good from three-point range. His teams were always relatively decent on the glass as well. I felt like he was always able to do more with less, so I think that this is a really good hire for Brown. Again, when it came to my projector of finish in the Ivy League, I had Brown at number 7. I still think that I have to put them there, but I mean, with everything that happened with Brown, this is not at all a downgrade in my opinion. As a matter of fact, I think that they are now going to be better coach than they were under Mike Martin. Not a knock on Martin, but I'm very high on this Eric Reveno hire. So very good on Brown for having that hire, and very good on us for getting our good friend Blake Lovell aboard on this podcast. He joins me next right here on Coast Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN, because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Blake Lovell aboard. He does such amazing work over at Southeastern 16. Today, you're going to look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he's dialed into this landscape all 12 months out of the year. He's doing amazing work over at Southeastern 16, where obviously they key in on the SEC, but they do so much more for Blake. He is just a wealth of knowledge that is always paying attention to this great sport, joins me a lot on this podcast, and always provides great insights. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell, and Blake, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks always for having me, Greg.
Blake, right now, I believe that we talked about it the last time you were on this podcast, and we'll talk about it again. We are in late July right now, and we've got so much uncertainty with regards to eligibility of so many of these guys. Like, I know that Keyshawn Hall about 24 to 48 hours ago, we remember what he did at Auburn. He's chasing eligibility. We've got the 25 men out there in California that are swinging for extra eligibility. Just how do you take a look at things right now? And can these guys, if they actually get the eligibility, be able to find a home with some of these teams?
Yeah, that's the question, right? It's just, I mean, we're getting to the point to where you would think if these kind of moves are made, like the calendar is going to be August. And, you know, I mean, we're a couple months away from the season at that point in terms of like teams starting full practice and all that kind of usual stuff. So it becomes a matter of, you know, how do you put your sort of priority on that when it's a matter of knowing that you've had these other guys who've been with your team now for almost maybe 3 months, in some cases, some more. You know, that's just what you're weighing if you're coaches. And that's what we always say, Greg, in this era. That's why, you know, it does. Like in terms of your roster, like it never stops. And this has been, you know, more of the extreme case now of having guys like this who may or may not be eligible to play. You're still having to work through that. And, you know, you never probably ever feel completely sure when it comes to these kind of scenarios, just based on all the NCAA responses and again, just kind of having to go the legal route with certain things. So it's a mess, man. And we've known that, for a while now. And I think this year, again, depending on some of these decisions, these lawsuits and how they play out, it's going to be even more of a mess than usual.
Yep, it certainly is. And it certainly is going to be affecting a few of these SEC teams. And is there a few teams in particular that you look at? Because I point out Keyshawn Hall, if he can get some eligibility, typically they allow a lot of these guys to be able to stay on campus after they graduate. I don't know if that's the case for him over at Auburn. I would need my Auburn sources for that one, but that's one that I think could be very intriguing. And I feel like there's a few teams looking at you, Kentucky, that might be in the market for signing one or two of these guys.
Yeah, like you said, that's where it really becomes a matter of.
Oh, I forgot to mention LSU. LSU is obviously in the market
yeah,
for all these guys.
LSU still, and again, we are about to turn the calendar to August. We still don't know what to expect from LSU. Like there just is very, very little clarity right now on them even, fielding a starting five at this point. We don't have that kind of clarity. And so, like you said, whether it is a guy like Keyshawn Hall or other guys that are maybe similar, although, again, just based on his output and such, he's going to be, one of the more coveted guys, I would think, just again, kind of with the experience and the production that he's had over the past couple of seasons. But, yeah, it really does become a matter of, if you're some of these teams that, let's say, you're looking around and you're saying, hey, we're a piece or more away. We felt like we may have addressed certain positions in the transfer portal, but we just maybe swung and missed. Well, now you've got a pool that opens up and you're like, well, maybe there is a possibility. And so even if you have a guy coming in late, you're going to be more likely, I think, to take a chance on guys like this and see if it works. And so that's where we're at.
Yep, we certainly are, man. It's just wild, to say the least, as our good friend Blake Lovell, who does such amazing work over at Southeastern 16, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Blake, you know what is absolutely wild is the just difference in dynamic that we're seeing across college basketball, more specifically in the SEC, because we're talking about these guys getting a fifth year of eligibility. Meanwhile, for the SEC, they're looking to gain talent by doing the exact opposite, having these guys for 2027 reclassified to 2026. So we might have 17-year-olds going up against like 25-plus-year-olds, which that'll be some good, clean family fun. But how have you taken a look at the SEC having so many players just all across the conference reclassifying for their respective teams?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it has really been the main theme here when you look at these guys and what it's going to mean for these rosters. I mean, obviously, Arkansas has gotten a pair of guys here, and I think that they could be significant when it comes to, what a Davion Thompson, adds to the mix for the Hawks, just based on them having, I think, one of the best perimeter / backcourt, combinations you're going to find in the country. And Cal's probably feeling really good about that. Obviously, again, you can go down the list and see other guys that kind of fit that criteria. Vanderbilt's got a big one now, and being able to bring in Gabe Naismith and guys like that. And so you just keep going down the line. There's quite a few of these ones. I mean, we talked about Marcus Spears at Texas and all these kind of guys. And so, yeah, it is one where, like we said, how do these guys with the high potential and the undoubtedly potentially great skill set, how do they, battle against a lot of these guys that maybe are in year 5 or year 6 in some of these scenarios? That's the big question in terms of the adjustments. It used to be if a guy was rated as a 5-star, it didn't matter what year it was. We're like, yep, he's just going to step in right away and he's going to be one of the best players on the floor. That's not always the case now, especially when you're talking about these power conferences. Even if you do have a guy, that is projected as a top 5 to 15 type recruit, there's no guarantees that he's going to come in and just be someone who can, kind of overpower a league that is filled with experience and all that. So, yeah, there's a lot of fascinating, scenarios now, I think, with a lot of these guys in the SEC. And you mentioned, I mean, there's so many great transfers that have come into this league with guys who are very, very experienced. And where is that balance going to be with some of these guys in that?
Yep, I do think that it is going to be a lot of intrigue out there, and I'm very curious to see what's going to be happening. And out of those guys that did reclassify, Davion Thompson over at Arkansas, Marcus Spears Jr. over at Texas, and Gabe Naismith over at Vanderbilt, which one do you think might make the biggest contribution right away? Because I think a lot of people will point out Marcus Spears Jr. because he's the #1 overall recruit for the class of 2027 that reclassified, but I just still have a feeling that Naismith might make the biggest addition, because I felt like for Vanderbilt, with how much they lost in the backcourt from last season, and I mean, Ace Glass coming in is great, getting back Tyler Tanner is great, but I felt like they were a piece or two away, and I feel like Naismith really shall we say, fills a void. Unlike with Arkansas and Texas, I felt like they were a little bit more solidified with their rosters than Vanderbilt was prior to Neesmith reclassifying.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, you're talking about rosters that feel like they are pretty much set when it comes to Arkansas and Texas. I mean, these are two teams that I had before these guys reclassified. Before you had Thompson and Caleb O, before they reclassified for Arkansas, I had them as my third best team in the SEC. Texas, before the Spears addition, I had them as my second best team in the SEC. We all know that Florida's probably going to be one in pretty much everyone's way too early top 25 in SEC rankings. But I just think, with Vanderbilt, to me, they were a team that some people were very high on. I wouldn't say I was down on Vanderbilt. I think I had them seventh in the SEC, which again, Greg, I don't think there's much difference, to be honest with you, in those teams that maybe are even 2 through 7. 2 through 8, maybe. I think they're just all very interchangeable. There are certain strengths, certain weaknesses, I think, that are going to stand out potentially on those teams. But with Vanderbilt, I was just kind of like, hey, they've got Tyler Tanner. They may have the best player in the country. They may have the SEC Player of the Year. But, it is a different roster around him than it was last year. There was a little more experience. This year, you're kind of banking on guys like Ace Glass, Sebastian Williams-Adams to be able to take that big step forward going into, a sophomore type year. And so I think it was really me just trying to figure out what that looked like. You've got a lot of experience in the front court. When you add someone like Naismith to a backcourt, that I think it was going to be curious to see how that rotation panned out. Tanner's going to be on the floor all the time, but when it comes to, again, that group of Ace Glass, a Chandler Bing, T.O. Barrett, even Anthony Brown, a very good freshman for Vanderbilt. So I think adding Naismith to the mix, like you said, with his skill set, gives you another intriguing option, and specifically what he's good at, maybe something that they were really looking for kind of this late in the process.
Yep, I'm right there with you. As our good friend Blake Lovell, he does such great work over at Southeastern 16. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Blake, no doubt about it, you're doing such an amazing job over there at the SEC, covering everything around them. And have you been taking a look at a lot of these rosters that have been coming up? Because I know that Texas A&M just released theirs about 24 to 48 hours ago. I made the joke that they were buying 5 cupcakes and getting the 6th for free because that one was a little bit underwhelming. There are some other teams like Alabama, it's going to go out there and they're really going to challenge themselves. And Texas, holy crud. Can they schedule anyone? Please, how have you taken a look at some of these teams with regards to scheduling? Because it feels like it's an all or nothing approach where you're going to get Alabama trying to play the Monstars every single night, and Texas, they're trying to find which team is going to be 366th out of 366 teams in terms of the Ken Palm rankings, and they're trying to book all those bottom 10 teams.
Yeah, I have not been impressed with some of these SEC non-conference schedules so far, to say the least. A little disappointed in most of them, to be honest with you. I mean, Texas is...
Wow.
Yes, it's a bad schedule. There's no other way to put it. And to be honest, I don't even think they have it listed on their website yet, even though it has been officially released. And I can see why. They're like, we don't want to put this entire thing up there for everybody to see. Because again, they are projected to be a top 10 to 15 team in the preseason. And I just think you've seen it over the years. And again, you're never going to doubt Nate Oates. They're always going to play a tough schedule. Alabama will probably... play maybe the toughest schedule. I think Arkansas and Kentucky be right there with them because both those teams, have a lot of high-profile games. Auburn scaled back a little bit, but I actually think that's a good thing because, my goodness, you shouldn't be playing Auburn's schedule last year every year. I think Stephen Pearl's like, I'll take a few more wins rather than that. So I'm okay with whatever Auburn's finds up looking like. But, yeah, you look at Texas, and I think Tennessee's released theirs, A&M as well. There are some things, that do stand out on some of these schedules, and I think, that's where – you get into people like Tennessee, of course. They're playing in bigger tournaments where you don't really know the combination of opponents, where you could have 3 or 4 games or whatever it is. So you're going to get your usual kind of home slate where maybe it's less than thrilling. And that's the thing, is I feel like Missouri is a team we've always kind of put in that class of, oh my goodness, look at this schedule. But Missouri's actually scheduled up this year. Theirs looks a lot better. And thankfully, right, because we have really just knocked them, I think, over the past little bit. So, yeah, it's a mixed bag so far and still more schedules to come out. But I really do wonder, Greg, and, this obviously it's a parallel to football right now. You've seen all the discussion this week for SEC football and the 9-game schedule and everybody wanting to be like, well, why don't we just schedule more cupcakes because we have a tougher conference slate? And maybe for the SEC, when you look at the expanded NCAA tournament, you feel pretty good about where you're at and not necessarily needing to overextend yourself because your conference should be able to handle enough in terms of your strength of schedule to where you don't necessarily have to go out anymore and feel like you have to schedule all these tough games because you do have some additional spots open for the tournament. You feel like, let's just rack up some more wins and see if that helps us out.
Yep, it's going to be so interesting to take a look at these teams and what that's going to mean for them in March, because as we know, the NCAA tournament has expanded as well. So could mean another bid or two for the SEC. Could that be a little bit costly with regards to seeding, though, I think is a big question. And Blake, we've had a lot happen in college basketball here over the last few weeks. We just fleshed it out with regards to all of these court cases, all the reclassification. Like typically, July is a nice kickback, look at the recruits for 2027, 2028, and so much more at the Peach Jam. Instead, it has been a lot of news coming out. And is there a team or two that now you're feeling either a little bit more bullish / bearish on with everything that's happened here this month?
Well, I'll tell you that there is a team that I've kind of focused in on. It's because we always, because you know us, Greg, me and Max Barr, we just go into the weeds here in July. Yes. We're already previewing games that don't take place until November or December. We're like, we want to give you a way too early look at some of these games. So recently, we took a dive into the Kentucky and Kansas game that's going to be coming up in the Champions Classic, whatever they call it now. And I think Kansas is one of those teams I'm so fascinated by. And it may not be a good fascination when it comes to how this thing plays out. I don't have a great read on what Kansas is going to be. Now, obviously, with Stokes there's a lot of expectations. And maybe, I can ask this question to you. I'm not sure if this feels like a Bill Self type roster right now. I think that's where we kind of see how everything kind of pans out in the front court. That I think is clearly where the big questions are with this Jayhawks team. But I am pretty interested to see how all, kind of the combination, whether it's having Leroy Blyden, again, of course, Tate Kenny's there, and then, of course, Stokes. I am so intrigued to see how Kansas looks in what we know, such a tough conference in the Big 12. I think you're going to have some of those teams, that weren't as good last year. You feel like they're going to get better. And so I think, it's such a fascinating league, whether it's teams like Kansas or seeing what Houston looks like with some new faces on the roster and all of that. I just think that's one to me that has become very interesting. We'll see how it pans out because I just think there's a lot of teams that are going to be getting better. West Virginia, certainly a team, probably one of the best in the country in terms of their transfer haul. Baylor, I mean, these are teams that I think are going to be on the way up. What does Arizona State do now with Randy Bennett? So a team like Kansas, who's kind of had its way at the top, other than Arizona, obviously making its move up, Iowa State and so forth, and Houston, of course. But I'm pretty interested to see how it plays out there.
Yep, I am as well. With Kansas, they get in Tyron Stokes. He was the number one recruit for the class of 2026. But I'm right there with you. The last few years, it just has been underwhelming in terms of transfer portal. They really didn't mesh last year as well. So I've got my question marks with them. I don't have any question marks with you, though, my friend. Blake, you're doing such amazing work over at Southeastern 16, all 12 months of the year. You've got your finger on the pulse of all that we're getting in this amazing sport. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, check out all of our SEC stuff over at Southeastern 16. Of course, plenty of off-season stuff and SEC basketball. Lots of stuff going up each week there. And yeah, everything else college basketball related, you can find me on Twitter /X at the Blake Lovell, where I'm always watching Greg Peterson run as many miles as he can in his living room. All the great challenges going on. One of my favorite things right now in the summer, Greg.
I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, and we've got ourselves just a lot that is happening in general. So a big thanks to our friend Blake for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now a part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. We've gone over 2,400 straight days without a missed podcast. Been dialing back a little bit in terms of conference previews with everything that we've been seeing in these court cases, what have you, but we'll be getting gas up a little bit more next week. Plan on doing the MEAC, the Missouri Valley Conference, all those mid-major conferences here in the next few weeks, so be on the lookout for that. Want to make this the greatest college basketball season ever, and once we get back in season, picks and analysis on every game every day. So appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.